Welcome back. I'm back from my travels. I'm back in Brisbane, and I was at ISMB where I presented at BOSC, and today I'm going to be doing a recording of that presentation, which is a flash talk, so we only had 5 minutes. I'll probably do a longer version at some point, because here on YouTube I don't have as much, I don't have any time restrictions, but today I'm going to record more or less what was presented, maybe being a little bit less strict on the 5 minutes. So this presentation was based on this manuscript that I published recently in PLOS Computational Biology, and I'll put up the link below, so you can read everything. And I'm just going to be showing you the main concepts. So the problem is known, so we've published tools, and in our group we published SemiBean, for example, or ArgNorm, and these are things that we make available for everybody to use. So we want other people to use, but they are normally built by students or postdocs who graduate and generally go on to do something else. So they're not continuing to work on the tools, even though the tools continue to be useful. So the maintainer of last resort, as Titus Brown says, is me. And so over the long term, the tool is useful, but there aren't any resources to maintain it. So how do we square this tension? And so what I'm proposing is that we front load the effort. So we put a lot of effort at the beginning, and then hopefully this will make it sustainable over the long term. And let me illustrate everything with a little cartoon. So the x-axis is time, marching ever forward. And so the project starts at some point, then we'll have the preprint, and then we have a paper. And the effort, curve looks a little bit like this, right? You start and you work hard, you get some results, you put out a preprint, and then, that also involves submitting to a journal. And so in that period, you still make a little bit of effort, but once the paper comes out, that's it. And oops, sorry, and a lot of our institutional infrastructure is based around this model, which I think is pretty accurate if you're discussing, say, a more biodiscovery-driven paper where you present your discoveries, and then maybe you have a follow-up paper, but that paper is done. With tools, however, what you want is other people to use them. So when you put out a preprint, you start getting people to use it. You get a little bump after you put out the paper, and then hopefully this will keep growing. But you also start to get support requests soon after you put out the preprint. And also, hopefully you'll start to get citations at some point, and citations is what really pays the bills. And so I think we've seen this anecdotally. I've never seen this actually quantified, but my impression is that the citations that we have for a tool, they tend to actually have quite a long lag between us putting the paper and starting to get citations. When we publish things that are more driven by biological discovery, we start to get citations really very, very quickly. And when we put out tools, we see this this relatively long lag between the tool being out and people citing it, and which makes perfect sense if you think that when we put out a discovery, people can incorporate it very quickly into their discussion sections of papers, for example. Whereas if we put out a tool that people are going to be using to produce their results to then cite us in the methods, they need to use the tool much earlier in the process. All right, so what we do is we go back to here, and so first of all, we're going to put out a test release. So we're going to put out this test release, and then we're going to be talking about the tool in social media, maybe at conferences, and maybe here on YouTube, and we start to pick up some interest as well already, even before the preprint, and hopefully, we're trying to shift the citation curve a little bit to the left so that citations come a bit earlier. So that's great. But the other thing we're going to do is we're going to try to really provide a lot of support at this very beginning, so that we decouple the amount of support we have to provide, which going down in time, even though interest and usage will keep going up. Right. So this is the theory, right? Does it work? Well, we have a track record that it does. So here, for example, Mahota's first commit was 2008, and the code is still going, it's still useful, it still gets a couple of citations every month, and so we're still maintaining it, and I'll show you an example in a minute. So all of these tools, even though they've been published, sometimes the original author has moved on with, and Gillette, for example, Paul did a lot of work, but then he moved on, and so let me just illustrate, for example, with Mahotes, what happened when NumPy 2 came along, and people started saying that, oh, Mahotes doesn't work with NumPy 2. Because things were set up correctly, so I could quickly fix any errors by first just adding NumPy 2 to the test suite. This triggered several errors, but it wasn't that much work to go and fix them, and so soon afterwards I was able to fix this for NumPy 2. Here's another example. So this was in Semibin, where a user made a mistake. The user passed in a file that was misformatted and got this, this complicated stack trace. And then, so we looked at it, we sort of discussed it, and it did turn out that the user was wrong. So they closed the issue. But what we did is we also added code that checked this. So that the very next user that faces the same issue, they'll get a much better error message. And our hope that, first of all, this will be a much better user experience, right? Because the user will be, instead of some horrendous internal error, they will see, file XYZ misformatted on line 17. But it will also be a much better experience for us because they won't contact us even. They'll be able to solve their own problems. This is the ideal, is that the user solves their own problems, they're happy, we're happy, we didn't even hear about it, right? And so to summarize, we're trying to front load the effort, and and beginning when there's user concerns, is really trying to really solve this, to decouple the amount of requests that we have from the usage, right? So this we now have a track record, and it keeps going, and we have a commitment to this going forward, right? So a lot of this came from discussions, internal discussions with my group, also discussions on social media. In fact, it was Tommy Macklin on Mastodon that really pushed me to end up writing this. So I want to thank them, and then the Australian Research Council, which funds me, and I want to thank you. So, wanted to play the out song, so I'll do a longer version for YouTube as well, but in the meanwhile, the paper is the long version. There's a link below, so please go read that. Comment. There's no question and answer on YouTube, but there's comments here or per email or social media. So and I hope to talk to you soon.